It's the 24th of May 2022. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're here. Hope you're having a good day in an age of extinction. I'm your host, Dana Durnford. I'll get to that later. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in anytime you want to the Nuclear Scumbag Show or call me at 709. I'm in Canada, so it's 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We have a poll for everybody tonight. Is growing food by nuclear power plants a crime against humanity? And of course, this is a crime against humanity. We've been covering this for many, many years. The documentation is unequivocal. And this is Finland's nuclear power plant surrounded by farms. Unbelievable. United Kingdom, Sizewell C, and B is there too, by the way, but that's the new power plant. It's surrounded by farms. And so that's not an accident that they do this. These all nuclear power plants release an absurd amount of radiation all the time. And Finland has Green Party, the first Green Party worldwide, is endorsing nuclear power. That's now we cover this kind of stuff all the time. What happens is the industry will take over, particularly stuff like organizations, .orgs and foundations, but also, of course, universities and media have all been captured worldwide. And so if you're somebody that breaks onto the scene in the last few years and you start up a .org or a non-profit, even worse, the industry will take that over. And you won't even understand what's happening. They'll get rid of the people that created it, and the industry will use that to bludgeon the very people it was meant to benefit. That's the legacy we see worldwide, repeatedly, in every country. As most of you probably are aware, I'm moving into another cheaper place for me to live and a cheaper studio. And so the transition is just starting. I'm packing. It's a sickening amount of work. It's actually just... It's backbreaking too on top of that. And so they just had a major earthquake in Japan. I covered that on my last live stream. And we're worried that these fragile, destroyed reactors that are in China syndromes the earthquake will cause that to release huge radioactive plumes like we have already seen. We have already seen happen to this planet worldwide. I'll give you a demonstration of that. This is a 16-day radioactive fallout model of Japan's releases, only based on venting, and it's based over 16 days, and it's by the French government agency. And you can see radioactive fallout covers the entire planet in just 16 days. And it's a continuous plume. And so this is why you're not cleaning insects off your windshields anymore. I posted a 2018 video 4 years ago. It was at the end of 2018, so 3 years ago. And you can see I'm a completely different looking person in that 3 years. I've been poisoned. I'm going to do another video, probably tomorrow night, on Gemstone if I'm not too tired from moving. And the last thing I'm going to disassemble is the studio. I'm going to try to keep doing my shows regularly. I'm not sure if I'll be able to pull it off, but as soon as we get in the new place, we certainly will be back on schedule. Finland's Green Party endorses nuclear power. And historical shift. Finland's Green Party voted overwhelmingly to adopt a fully pro-nuclear stance at a national meeting. And so the headline tonight is Fukushima, or Finland Green Party is anti-Finland. Yeah, Finland's Green Party is anti-Finland. It is growing food by nuclear power plants against crimes against humanity. Such an important thing for the world to wake up and understand that growing food around nuclear power plants are building the plants in farmland so the farmlands will suck up the radiation. Because otherwise this becomes a nuclear wasteland. Because the farms suck, and you notice how the farms encroach on it right up to the facilities' perimeters. This is by actual design, and so is a river. They need everything to be washed downhill also. So the farms, of course, they're harvesting the food and shipping the radiation contaminated food out to the victims. And this is 100% agenda that we see now for the entire legacy of the nuclear industry. If you go back and look at the first reactors they were building, these were all exactly the same thing in farmland. And they understood back then the vulnerability of all the species to the radiation. The party manifesto now states that nuclear is sustainable. This is pure voodoo science, by the way. And demands, they never wasted a single second, did they? The reform of current energy legislations to streamline the approval process for small modular reactors that don't even exist. And so when you see that particular connotation, that's the attribute associated with the takeover of the nuclear industry of an entity. This is how they framed their narratives. We've seen this worldwide, the exact framing of the narrative. Finland is the first Green Party worldwide to adopt such a position. And I'm very happy and proud Sid T. Tomanik, who attended the conference as a voting member of the chair of Voilt, the pro-science, really there's an anti-science internal group of the party. It's very disturbing, this particular story. And you see him braying, this is a historical moment in the history of the genocide movement, now infested the Green movement, as we are the first Green Party in the world officially let go of pro-life, anti-nuclearism. So they label you, you're anti-nuclear, or you're an environmentalist. No, I'm a human who knows the difference between right and wrong. Don't put labels on me because I'll find you, kick the shit out of you. The action was taken at a 2-day Green Party conference, which includes 400 participants representing local party groups and other interest groups from across Finland, the Nordic country. Now, Finland was incredibly destroyed by Chernobyl's radioactive fallout. You would think that they would know better. The approved platform also supports license extensions for existing biological disease factories known as nuclear reactors, and gives the green light for replacing the plan, which the company today actually came out and done the opposite, cancel it. Power plant, I'm not going to try to butcher another language's name, recently cancelled over the Ukraine crisis because the supplier was Russia's state-operated anti-human Rosatom. Whenever you heard this word that it's low-carbon baseload energy production, you got to take into consideration that they're desperate for some kind of image in the nuclear industry. And so it's very telling when you see them with no narrative, just that one so-called attribute. But of course, I'll debunk that for you. That fable that it's somehow carbon-free, which is, these are some of the most bizarrest assertions you're ever going to hear from the industry. Well, first off, all nuclear power plants need 2 external power supplies, gas, oil, or coal plants, just to operate. One of these terrorists is the so-called shoe bomber, and the other terrorist is a nuclear scientist. There's no difference. These are both terrorists. It's such an important story tonight. It breaks my heart that they've done something like that. Doesn't surprise me because we've seen this repeated, how the nuclear industry takes over a country and then destroys it from the inside. So all nuclear power plants need 2 external plants, usually coal, oil, and gas, of course. They can't run on their own electricity. And they need that 2 coal plants typically because they're the cheapest, to build it, to run it for its lifespan, and for 60 to 100 years to decommission it. They need these 2 external dedicated power supplies. If you should ask all power plants for a bill for their grid each year, and the numbers will truly shock you. These things are disease factors. Apparently, that's the only reason I can see them existing. They're out there trying to convince you that it's the radiation from the reactors is like sunshine. And so my Geiger counter does not register sunshine, for starters. It's like walking in sunshine, or it's like the natural rocks, or like one of the most revolting things they like to say is like bananas, potassium. Comparing potassium, the same amount of potassium, to man-made stuff is the same as comparing a stick of dynamite to a nuclear bomb. But a gram of man-made anthropogenic radiation has enough atoms to poison billions and billions and billions of species of insects and humans. And as you bioaccumulate it, there's up to 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's a very, very long list because your immune system is compromised. So the Geiger counter, if their claim is like sunshine, then you can't use a Geiger counter only at nighttime, right? Because this is a ludicrous assertion to compare it. So when you're reading radiation on your Geiger counter by a ship, these ships they just drive around the ocean dumping 45-gallon barrels over the sides. For UK, for instance, had done it for 30 years. Finland had done it for many, many years too, by the way, just dumping it in the ocean. So if you if say you got a shipload of bananas and it sinks off your coastline, you don't have to evacuate your graveyards for the rest of your life. Imagine a headline after a truck accident of bananas that the people in the community now can go visit the family graves. You're never going to hear it, right? So if your bananas potassium blows up, you're not going to pick up 30 to 60 million one-ton bags. This is enough bags to circle the planet with trucks bumper to bumper 5 times, which is just 3% of the land that they actually cleaned up. It dwarfs... now, of course, if you bury any metal in the ground, it'll rust pretty quick. If you bury these drums, which are bombarded with neutrons, and so they're very fragile, what you known as brittle drums. And cardboard boxes and wooden boxes were used to dump this stuff and bury it. And of course, this every time it rains now, it ends up in the water tables. And the only ultimate outcome is extermination of all species. 30 million tons of radioactive waste in 2015. There's 5 rows of traffic with 1-ton trucks, bumper to bumper worldwide, right around the world, rather 5 times. And they never stopped picking up. It was only 3% of the land. These people, you see spraying regions, they would have died that day, wearing paper suits. TEPCO says he burned 7,000 of these paper suits each day. That person would have died that day. They're spraying a reagent right after the accident. This is the homeless, the destitute victims of society, immigrants that don't speak the language, because nuclear scientists, academics, corporations, and students would never go to a meltdown under any circumstances. This is a typical uranium mine. And this is... Navajo has 15,000 of these abandoned disease factories. The processing facilities, just to get the yellow cake. The pond you see is chemicals, and that's evaporated or leached, or the dam will bust and it'll just pour into the community or into the environment. But the fact they evaporate this just incredibly brutal, hideous chemical into the environment, how can you call it carbon-free? How is using this huge, massive equipment carbon-free? And then the fuel can only last 1.5 years, say. So all of this, and then you can't drink the water in any of these communities. The whole processing just to get it into the reactor as fuel, it's absurd. It really is, right? You're using 2 coal plants, oil or gas, to run a nuclear power plant. This is absurdness to call it carbon-free. It's ludicrousness. But that's the only thing they got and that they use constantly as justification for the genocide. These are chemical ponds. This is just to get this is not the processing to get the fuel ready. This is just the mining facet of it. And then the toxic stuff left over from the processing to get it from the mines to the fuel is the dumping and the endless ocean dumping for decades and dumping in the ground for decades. So carbon free, makes me so proud to be a weirdo pro-nuclear, I guess. These red dots you're seeing are in communities over huge parts of America. This is just a couple. At one point, they had 55,000 of these silos, that each of these silos are in a community. And in order for a country to attack the silo, and if you don't understand this, you have to attack the community. So they're holding the communities hostages, and all of these nuclear bombs have a huge amount of tritium-3H. This is a very carcinogenic isotope. So that's hemorrhages into the community. You have to replenish it every 12 years on top of that. You're boiling 1 million gallons a minute up these stacks. That's 4,500 tons. And a typical glass of salt water would have 1 billion creatures. And 75 to 100 million of them would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. The other 900 million creatures in a glass would be the eggs and larvae, the soup of life itself. 440 nuclear power plants around the world doing that. The skinny stacks are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment from incinerators on site that they're actually burning nuclear waste with, and from the fuel pools. The fuel pools are full of reactor cores that are still splitting the same amount of atoms they would normally split to power millions of homes. And that'll go on for hundreds of thousands of years. There's no containment, and the radiation now is hemorrhaged into the environment from the fuel pools, landing in those farms, and the food is distributed. Of course, the radiation goes global. It doesn't just land in farms. So an event after 16 days, you cover the planet with radiation. So calling it carbon-free is the most sadistic thing conceivable. 3 million children after Chernobyl, which was a single brand new reactor that was 200 tons, mostly graphite, still managed to, and which is, each of Fukushima reactors is over 700 tons of pure uranium and pure plutonium. Infinitely more radiation than was at Chernobyl per gram. But still, Chernobyl was 3 million children. If you go to the scumbag United Nations website, they'll claim 28 people died. These are absurd assertions. You can't go back to your communities, but nuclear is carbon-free. You dumped it in the ocean for 30 years where it's under pressure. As the barrel sinks every 33 feet, there's an extra 14 plus pounds per square inch applied to it. When it gets down around 100 feet, it caves in, the lid pops off, and the radiation is released into the environment. No nuclear scientists, academics, nuclear students, nuclear universities, nuclear corporations have ever went to Fukushima. Just the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. How can you call it carbon-free? Because you put capes on it and call them superheroes. You indoctrinate children with Spider-Man and the Hulk, and the children don't understand the difference as they get older. And now we have The Simpsons, which is ridiculously indoctrinated the children.
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
Sure looks carbon-free to me. United Nations is reporting, I picked this off James Lucid on the last show, monkeypox. And United Nations, if not, United Nations is at the forefront of reporting stuff like this, it's most likely a false flag event, a staged event. And monkeypox says it's magically showed up in 11 countries. It's a debilitating disease out of nowhere. And of course, the elites like to call us monkeys. Appropriate name if you don't like somebody. So when they're burying the barrels, they're already undergone denigration from the nuclear waste's adverse side effects, like the neutron bombardment destroys the integrity of the material. This is a problem with all nuclear power plants. 90% of the facilities are radioactive when they try to decommission the site. This is what takes so long, is because 90% of everything, the cement, the sidewalks, the road, everything has been bombarded with neutrons for so long. So carbon-free, you can't touch each other. This is a picture of victims separated. Carbon-free nuclear, everywhere you look, you see that connotation. If you go way back to Hanford, look at the dumping. Most of that, what you're looking at, is just a fraction. They have 41 miles currently of unlined trenches where they dumped liquid, high-level nuclear waste in the 50s and 60s, for goodness sakes. There's a spot on the Columbian River, downriver from just not very far, several miles from Hanford, which runs all the way to the Pacific Ocean past huge cities. There's a spot on the shoreline where it's over 70 sieverts per hour. That's most likely waste that was just dumped in the river in the 50s, because that's what they were doing, like quite a few countries. But if you're on a speedboat and you were fishing along that shoreline, you'll die 2 weeks later, because that starts to melt your organs and you can't stop that effect. Hanford used to take retired government employees and people in nearby communities and get them to sit in fields as they were doing major releases. The stories I can tell you about that is just, there's a graveyard not far from Hanford full of around 700 incredibly disfigured children that had died. You can't go back to your communities, but nuclear is carbon-free. Where's the logic in all of this? So this was another major carbon-free deception. They didn't want anybody interviewing. At this moment, this is where the Fukushima 50 kind of disappeared, because Fukushima 50 allegedly says we don't want to be interviewed anymore by the media. So the media's now the Fukushima 50 would have been dressed exactly like the other people in their paper suits. But the idea of the tarp was like for the media to go away. That was one of the strangest things we've seen. Nuclear is so carbon free you can't go back to your communities. You've got to run away and leave your pets and your animals to starve to death, and that's what they've done. The nuclear waste locations, all those green dots, they're venting into the environment. The majority of these are in major farmland and designed to pollute you. So Finland's Green Party holds 20 seats in the national parliament as part of the government's coalition, holding the foreign ministry, the internal ministry, and the Ministry of Environment and Climate. The arrogance to say you're in charge of the climate is just unbelievable. That kind of hubris can only come from these kinds of people. Global warming is radioactive fallout. That is unequivocally what global warming is. And just let me explain that. I just moved that over there. So Fukushima radioactive fallout, it was the straw that broke the climate's back, so to speak. 76 years of these constant emissions. But so a nuclear bomb would be a big plume goes up and spreads out. This is a continuous plume, non-stop, coming from China syndromes in Japan, covering your entire planet. This model is 20 days. If you let the model run, of course, it's not that long before it covers the rest of the planet. This is extremely impressive because radiation, my Geiger counter picks up the radiation gamma only, not the neutrons or alphas or betas or the X-ray caused by these colliding. This is a continuous plume. This is the most, imagine that was a snowstorm covering the planet. Then you probably get it, right? Imagine if the snow didn't melt. Well, imagine it's like a snowstorm, but you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throws rocks at it. That's a joke in case you didn't catch my humor. It pulses at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per millisecond. Over and over and over for millions of years. That's coal, oil, and gas emissions don't have those attributes, right? So carbon doesn't pulse energy. In fact, carbon doesn't make plumes like that at all, ever. The only thing that makes plumes that covers the entire planet and is capable of global warming is man-made anthropogenic radiation. The fallout is not necessarily fallout. It'll hang close to the ground. It's pulsing energy, so it's like a little motor where it's able to stop itself. But some of it will assimilate into the plants, and you end up with radioactive pollen worldwide. And this is why you see the mass bee, one of the biggest contributors to the mass bee die-off. And you can, if you go back to 2011, you'll see the species die-off accelerate, supercell storms accelerating. First off, the radiation goes in your forest. It kills the bacteria and the fungus. So the litter doesn't break down, and the ecosystem is no longer healthy. And so when you have a forest fire, it's much more intense because all the foliage and litter didn't get recycled through the ecosystem. This also, of course, contributes to global warming. The global warming is real, and you can trace it all the way back through the nuclear industry's legacy. It's accelerated, and now we're seeing supercell storms worldwide. They're caused because this heated up the planet and the oceans and the land masses. It's pulsing energy every second. Now, I've done major research expeditions. Let me just touch on that for 1 second. So this is one of the many, many research expeditions where I went to Alaska 6 times and looked for doing species counts along the whole coastline. What we discovered, and I do this each year, and currently going to be doing this in the next couple of weeks again. And what we discovered was that in British Columbia all the way to Alaska, year after year, the species disappeared after Fukushima. And that the media didn't report on it. The media still claims it looks like the pictures to your left, and it doesn't, of course, because we've done the research expeditions year after year, 4 to 5 months a year doing research expeditions. So this is an extinction level event. And the nuclear industry is very well positioned, very well funded to take over your .orgs, your non-profits, your governments, your universities, your schools, your institutions, your mass brainwashing Hollywood-type medias. Typically, this is what it looked like. These were rainforest, tropical forest coastline. 4 to 5 months a year in rain gear and adverse conditions every day. Very dangerous conditions. I shipwrecked on a number of occasions. Very arduous, very scary things to do is to go out on the ocean by yourself. And we went in desperation and to see if we could record the damage, and it was a complete extinction event. I was vilified and demonized and smeared and attacked and stalked and trolled ever since, and very few to defend me. When I was on the ocean, there was no one to defend me, and they destroyed my reputation despite the fact that I'm actually a good person. And what I do is public service for this planet at great cost, great sacrifice, and also to my health. Party leaders welcome the shift in the manifesto taken at the conferences. Sufficient supply, again, calling it low carbon, as I showed you, this is a ludicrous assertion. With minimum environmental footprint, again, these are ludicrous, disgusting, false statements by this industry. They claim there's a very tiny footprint for their legacy and their current. It's just too much. It's too much. It's nothing but a betrayal. Every facet of the nuclear industry is a betrayal. Imagine you can't drink the water in any of these communities because of the byproduct of nuclear. Everybody should claiming small footprint. When the process takes years and years and years and years of carbon intensive, and then the fuel cycle is only about a year and a half. And you got to have external power supplies to run the facilities, to build them, to run them, and for 100 years to decommission them. Party leaders welcome the shift in the manifesto taken at the conference, and claiming low carbon energy with minimal environmental footprint is key to building a sustainable future is true. It's not going to be nuclear. The MP told the Alliance for Science, as if there was no representation of science on the planet only by this particular group. The Vice Chair and leader of the Green Parliamentary Group added, too often we see debates stuck in putting renewable and nuclear against each other, when in fact this is the argument we hear all the time, of course. It's a Freudian argument. When in fact we should be making sure we efficiently drive the use of fossil fuels down as quickly as possible, because the military needs it to stay a misery machine forever and ever. There's not, first off, the International Energy Agency said in January that last year renewable energy was 291 gigawatts. Nuclear was only 0.4. And that's equal to 333 nuclear plants worth of renewable energies online in just 12 months. And between 2020 and 2026, the next 4 years, there will be a new 4,800 gigawatts of renewables online. And that's equal, of course, to 5,500 nuclear power plants in just 6 years. So how can small modular reactors or keeping your current ones you got be competitive when the money could be easily and more appropriately legitimately used on, because you got wind and solar, you back it up with geothermal and tidal energy, and which are 24 hours, 7 days a week, predictable for thousands of years down the road, backed up by pumped hydro, because you can recycle the water, the same water over and over and over for your peak power of 6 to 8 hours a day. And if you put a lot of mineral in the water, water is much heavier, so that you can create even more energy. And if you used compressed air storage, where you dig mine shafts and just compressed air as storage, you can harvest the heat from the compression and liberate the heat when you want to unpack the compressed air storage. There's several examples of that now going on worldwide. In fact, there's no toxic material used in the whole process on top of that. And you can build them anywhere. There's only 120 psi. It's the end of the fuel, gas, oil, coal, and nuclear if you actually apply the obsolete technology that exists, but we're being held back by this genocidal nuclear industry that builds these nuclear plants in farmland to poison you on top of that. Told the Alliance for Science that there was very little support for anti-nuclear, for pro-life, and for future of humanity's revisions put forward in the conference. So the nuclear industry took over the Finland's decision makers, basically. Small group of people now will destroy the community and the country from inside. And we've seen this over and over. Canada's been completely destroyed. 93 days after Fukushima's nuclear meltdowns, Canada lifted all restrictions on food from anywhere in Japan, while 55 countries banned it for over 10 years in 14 prefectures. So 55 countries banned it from 14 large prefectures, almost half the country in farmland itself. Fukushima is just one prefecture. And of course, it should have been banned from all of Japan, because Japan is poison, and by proxy now has poisoned the rest of the planet. This is the plutonium, which is named after the devil, 239 dispersal. There's many of these types of dispersal models that are by major institutions of Fukushima radioactive fallout, showing the unmitigated genocide machine. The Green Party's shift represents a win for Finnish Greens for science and technology, again claiming that science and technology was being suppressed when they control all the universities. It's a ludicrous assertion, and it's used to attack, it's used like brainwashing, MK Ultra, if you will, which was founded in 2008 as an internal party group in 2008 to advance political decisions makings that is based on scientific knowledge, because Finland didn't use science until they came along, apparently. Imagine the incredible, unbelievable, pompous, hubris, arrogant people these must be. Along with internal lobbying from the science-oriented Vitry group. So this was a takeover by a lobbying, pro-nuclear lobbying group. The shift to a more pro-nuclear stance was also driven by a change of stance from the Green Youth, which is one of these is Fridays for Future, which is Greta Thunberg, whose anti-nuclear group was taken over also by the nuclear industry. I tweeted Greta and Elon Musk for quite a few hours today with these kinds of tweets, and I articulated the headline in the description of each and every one. And so I came out today and went after Fridays for Future, which is now pro-nuclear, Greta Thunberg, which is anti-nuclear, and Elon Musk, who is pro-nuclear. And I tweeted this out. I got another huge folder for tomorrow to tweet out. And this is what I've done today when I had spare time, but I'm packing today. I'll start moving in a few days, hopefully tomorrow or the next day. It's a big process. It's a stupid amount of work. It's an absurd, sickening amount of work to try to save some money to keep this operation moving forward. So yeah, this is what I done today. I took my time, and every 5-10 minutes when I could, I done one of those tweets. How about you? And let's keep the Finland branch of Fridays for Future, which I tweeted all day today. The group started by the Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg. Now, we've seen this over the years where they'll take young, vulnerable people like this, give them a platform, let them build up a movement, and then take over the movement. And the people that created the movement, it's done so cute, they don't even understand what happened to them. She released a statement last December disavowing anti-nuclear statements by Greta, not she, but them, came out and said, we don't stand, this is the group she started, came out and said, we don't stand with Greta, anti-nuclear, we're pro-nuclear. But Greta started, this is her group. So it's like somebody coming taking a nuclear proctologist and being pro-nuclear, and I'm out there, what's going on? That's what happened to her. And that's your problem with foundations, with .orgs that are public, and also not-for-profits. They get taken over by the machine quite quickly. So you do all the work, build the organization, they take it over and weaponize it against you and destroy your years of hard work and your hopes and your dreams and the future of all species. This is because they're not capable of doing it themselves, first off, but they're terrified of anybody. As you can see, 30 people, 29 people on my stream finally after 47 minutes. The censorship, because I had 24,200 subscribers for 5 years, not 24,201, or not 24,199, but 24,200 subscribers for 5 years. I never got an extra one, never lost one. And last year when I was on a research expedition for spiders, 400 miles into the woods, the spiders are missing because of radioactive fallout. They took down my site with no strikes, with no emails, with no warnings, while I was on a research expedition reporting from Ground Zero, and took that platform away from me, the lobbyists at Google. Incredible betrayal. I worked so hard to build that site for 10 years with 1,600 presentations on it, and somebody went in pro-nuclear and just destroyed it to get rid of any facts and documentation that showed them wanting. But I started this site where I have to struggle. I typically only get subscribers every Sunday, 3 or 4. The Finnish Fridays for Future group wrote in response that opposition to nuclear power will complicate and increase the already enormous task of addressing the climate emergency. They continued, if we want to stop global warming, this was the nuclear industry powers report, below 1.5 degrees, we need every possible means, including nuclear power, which is the opposite. Global warming is nuclear power. Unequivocally. There's nothing on the planet that heats the planet up. Carbon can't heat a planet up. Carbon can't make plumes like this. Carbon is natural. We can't survive without carbon. Plants can't survive without carbon. The 8 million species can't survive without carbon. Remember, this is the same group that builds their nuclear power plants in farmland, for goodness sakes. Do you really think that they're going to be doing anything different besides trying to exterminate all the species? The Russian attack on Ukraine is also likely to have solidified support for nuclear. Well, it takes you 14 years to get nuclear up and running. A plant. You can have 333 every year of renewables, the animosity equivalent of nuclear. With no adverse side effects, no toxicity, no harmful... Well, I mean, you can't do it with zero, but compared to nuclear, it's the proper alternative. The Finnish Greens, along with other political parties in the country, have also reversed their stance on joining NATO, now supporting the imminent move. Finland is a frontline state sharing a long border with Russia, so they're joining NATO. So the picture they were using is a nuclear power plant in Finland, surrounded by farms. The ultimate betrayal, yeah? It's absurd. It's the most scariest picture you'll ever see is a genocide disease factory surrounded by farms. It's incredible, really. Why would you do something like that, Dana? Well, it's you eat the food. They get rid of any resistance. And there's even communities around this one. Look at it. Horrifying. And the farms are right up to the border of the disease factory. We got a poll tonight. We got 25 likes, 38 votes. Is growing food by nuclear plants, power plants, crimes against humanity? 97% knows better and says yes, it is. And the pro-nuclear showed up. The lunatic that are same people, no doubt, that are censoring me. The cowards that are censoring me. Which is the nuclear industry. In fact, I got to go in here and turn on, in case somebody got this embedded on their site. In case somebody got this embedded on their site. Whenever my video goes live, we got a couple of things that happens. And my mouse won't let me roll. Hang on. So I got to go and click Allow Embedding and then Save. Save. So that's saved. So now anybody trying to embed the video on my live stream, then it will stream for them. You notice I have almost no thumbs up, no views on most of my videos in the last 2 weeks because I talk about farming Fukushima food. But another thing you might as well show you while you're here is that once my video is posted, I can't share it with the community. Publish to subscribers, subscription feed notify subscribers is turned off on all of my videos. So when my video is over, I can't share it to the audience. And as you see right now, there's barely anybody watching my video, 27 people. Well, there could be 500 people watching it, but that's what they're going to do to discourage people from watching it, from getting educated, for having another narrative. It's such a cowardly thing to do, isn't it? Okay. This is what we have grown to expect from this industry. So, Jim Stone says that Fukushima was a staged event and that this reactor was blown up by a nuclear weapon. That's backed up by the lady at Camelot, or hang on here. So does these two buildings look like they were, first thing you gotta ask yourself, do they look like they were blown up by nuclear weapons in Stuttgart? So the official story of an earthquake, and if you go look at the videos of Tokyo and 2011 event, you'll see all the buildings in Tokyo swaying. But Jim Stone says there was no earthquake, it's totally fake. I'm going to probably have to do a video on that update.
And when those reactors exploded, I knew, because of my technical background, that there was no way that that could happen.
Of course, this is why we got sirens all around nuclear power plants, you know. Yeah, so I'm going to do another show on that. We're going to take questions from the comments section in that show. Let me go back to the reactor. So they're saying that, you know, 3 Mile Island didn't happen, Chernobyl didn't happen, the SL1 didn't happen, Mayak didn't happen, the Santa Susana didn't melt down, and the list goes on and on. This is like critical thinking skills. Not everybody has them, that's okay, right? I happen to be blessed with it, and so when I show the evidence and people still want to argue with me, then they're not being realistic. So does that building look like it blew up by a nuclear bomb? This is what he's trying to convince you, by the way, that these were blown up by a nuclear bomb. That was reactor 3, the mixed oxide fuel reactor. It's reclaimed uranium, plutonium. Fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. There are decades of reactor cores. They're gone. And so the claim that these were blown up by a nuclear bomb should have been the first clue for everybody that this is nonsense. Instead, I've seen a number of people turn on me because I talk about the subject. And there's not much I can do. I've been at this for a long time. It's not the first time, won't be the last. These people, these creatures, I named them there for you, are pretending they're at the top of a building that don't exist because nuclear is carbon free or because Fukushima is an extinction event. We're in real danger, and we need the world to do the moral and ethical thing and reject nuclear and come on over to the winning side and promote a future for all species on this planet, not just humans. Humans are not the only species. If we refuse to acknowledge the species, my research expeditions year after year, I've been doing this for many years, and I've been at this long before Fukushima came along on top of that. on the nuclear subject in particular, the research clearly shows there's an event happening, and the media are out there pretending they're on a building that don't exist. If that doesn't frighten the daylights out of you, you need to go back and watch what I showed you so far. My playlist is full of presentations on different topics. So if you want to learn about the tanks, there's presentations there that specifically cover the tanks and the filtration systems, etc., etc. And the truth is completely different from the version they're feeding you. And go all the way back to my first video on this site. It was like a 17-minute video that details Fukushima in about 17 minutes. So the censorship tonight is overload. That's the normal around here. I'm going to play this clip of these crazies pretending they're on a building that don't exist. They're going to pretend they're on that building way up in the sky in a perfect fuel pool. They're not the only ones.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Okay, so do you really think that the major media is just faking that because they're bored? Because they got nothing better to do? No, of course not, right? And so because I'm packing and taking things apart and getting ready to move, we're not going to be doing long shows for the next week or so. We will do shows. I will be censored, and I will do whatever I can to keep this conversation of facts only, no propaganda. And so I can understand a lot of people don't want to follow this subject or can't follow the subject or get sick of the subject or something like that. It's because they don't get the big picture or they don't have the heart or something. I don't hold that against anybody. I understand it. It's not easy for me to do this all day, every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, year after year, okay? It's not. And it's not fun either. And it's complicated. I'm not allowed to make a mistake. I'm not allowed to have a Freudian slip or that's somehow doubt. And I'm not a bad person for doing a moral and ethical thing. And Jim Stone claiming this was a nuclear bomb is ludicrousness. 680 kilometers the coastline got washed away. For goodness sakes. Nuclear bombs don't do that. You can start off a localized tsunami with a nuclear bomb, but you would also have the explosion sending huge plumes of the ocean up in the air that would have been visible to everybody. And back then everybody had a cell phone with a camera on it. There would have been no way to hide it. But obviously there was no nuclear bomb. There was no Stuxnet used at this facility, period. This was a nuclear meltdown caused by the earthquake and the tsunami, where it lost all external power because it's dependent on external power. This was an event, but it was made worse by the cover-up. It's made worse by the propaganda machines. And to watch Finland denigrate hurriedly now into the abyss of stupid and set a precedence by the Green Party standards, because the industry has taken over that. How long before they take over the rest of the Green Parties worldwide? I can assure you they're trying, and they're very successful when they do that. That's the reality of it. So for the poll tonight, we got 41 votes instead of 60 or 70 or 1,000. 98% got the right vote, and I appreciate that. I'll do a shout out, because why not? Peaceware, Rock Nemeth. The way the uranium plutonium oxides is difficult to envision, but volume is something my mind can easily imagine. How many cubic feet would 720 tons would be 720,000 feet? Almost 1 million cubic feet. No. 700, well, a ton is 1,000 liters. Okay, I got it wrong. So a ton is 1,000 liters. I got no idea. I'll look into it for you off top of my head. I wasn't expecting. I meant to look at that earlier. Albert, Thinker, Colette. Hi, everybody. James Lucid. And Peaceware. Good night, everybody. Jake. Who? Peaceware. Katja. Good night, everybody. Nuclear fraud and disease factors. Yeah, that's what nuclear is. It's a lunatic, crazy, mad industry that is completely out of control. Jeffrey Brown. Good night, everyone. As far as I know, I'm doing a show tomorrow night. Probably end up doing the stuff I never got to tonight. Shane Clark. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Ryan Underwood. Philip Wan. The wise person. We raised $100. I'll just shout out that was from Finland, donation. Appropriately, isn't it? It's kind of weird how that worked out. Port Angeles. Snakes and Doggies. Nerad, Uloft. Michael Allport. Stephen Young. Hi, Stephen. You're welcome, Katja. Thank you. Snakes and Ladders. I'm going to end the poll. 44 votes. 44 votes. 97%. Peaceware, yeah. Thank you, folks. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you're watching this later. See everybody tomorrow night. Looks like really heavy censorship tonight. And shame on Finland for doing what they done. Shame on the science, the so-called science organization, lobbying group that hoodwinked the entire country now and has set the country on a path to self-destruction. Shame on you. Shame on Fridays for Future, who turned their backs on Greta, who gave them that opportunity to stab her in the back. Shame on you folks. What a cowardly thing to do. What a revolting, twisted, sadistic thing to do. Everybody else, God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, folks.